Hello, my name is Daniel Rosowski and I am the host of My Time.
My name is Derek and it is my time.
Well, Derek, are you ready for your time?
Yep, it's my time.
Okay, great. It's great to have Derek here. This is the first episode. We're going to see how this goes. First of all, Derek, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. You know, like it's good to be in your presence at all times, right? We're good friends and we play basketball and we're going to play hockey even he hurt his leg, so we'll see what happens. Anyway, Derek, we're going to ask you 3 questions. The first question is, what do you do?
What do? I go to school as a PhD student. I play music, I like playing sports, I like cooking, and I like arguing with people about politics and society. And I grow lots of plants. And yeah, I think that's about it.
Well, that's really good. That's really interesting because you do a lot of very interesting things, obviously. And I've known you for a long time, and you've been in university for how many years now?
It would be nine straight.
9 straight years of university. That, in fact, is insane. How do you enjoy it?
I love it and hate it at the same time.
Right.
Certain things in year 9 get really easy, but certain things, that assumption that it'll get easier as it goes, some things do, but then there's just these other things that get even harder.
We're back here with Derek, and we're still talking about what he does. Also, so you're in school, and are you near completion?
I'm actually, I'm about a quarter of the way. It's 3 to 4 years. So essentially I started in April. So yeah, it'll be only a year in April. But it already feels like it's been 10 years.
I bet. Yeah. Well, that's good. What's your focus after you're done with that?
I don't know, to be honest. I've been rethinking the path that I took in terms of academia. It's like most things, you romanticize it and you look at it very idealistically, but then the further you go, you're like, oh, it's not really what I thought it would be. You know, it's more like you have to kind of go with what they want, not what you want, and so... Okay,
well, I've talked to you about politics a number of times, and like you have very interesting insights, obviously, now because of what you've learned, right?
Yeah.
And like, you talk about your music. I remember back in, 2000, right when we were in Junto, it was a political type of music, right? And since that time to now, how has your views changed from one like aspect to another? Like maybe you're the same, whatever, left wing, right wing. I know you're probably left wing, but like how have things evolved for you over that time?
Well, that's a great question actually, because it's interesting. My beliefs haven't really changed. I just understand them in more depth, and I could start to draw parallels, or how would you put it, causation with other things that go on in society.
Okay.
I look at everything now, it's holistic, right? It's all a homogenization of components, variables, whatever you want to call it. And so what happens over here affects something over here. And I used to look at politics in a vacuum, and so things that outside of politics were somehow influenced or tied to an event over here, say in economics. And so I'm starting to see that, oh, actually, they're all kind of interchangeable, meaning they affect each other in different ways. And so when I was in the year 2000, I had a very surface level understanding, but the more I've learned, it's only reinforced those initial beliefs.
Interesting. That's really awesome, because I still listen to your music and I find it inspiring, what you guys wrote about and what you talked about, and it's very interesting where you've come 20 years later, and how academic you are now compared to how you were then. But that's really good. Right now, are you in a band? Are you in
Yeah, it's called Brainhammer.
Brainhammer, okay. So do you guys play shows ever? But I know this is COVID-19, there's only 3 of us here.
Well, we don't play shows. One of our members just had a baby, Dominic.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Joel.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, we've just been, recording, writing. It's very heavy music, and it's very Because what I usually do with school and the rest of my life is very serious. Would be the opposite end of that spectrum. We just sing about ridiculous things, and it's a good way to balance it out. The heavy with the music's heavy, but the concepts aren't very heavy.
They make you smile, right? Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, one more thing you talked about, you grow vegetables. Yeah. That's good. You don't eat meat either, right? That's...
Right, I haven't eaten meat, 98, I think.
But fish is something that you still consume, right?
Yeah, maybe a couple times a year. It seems my girlfriend's vegan, so less and less do I eat fish and dairy. So.
Can I ask you why you don't eat meat?
Yeah. Well, the first, I guess there'd be two reasons. The first one, it's more of an innate hesitance to eat meat. For example, growing up in rural areas, you go to the rink, right? You eat a rink burger, right? Mm-hmm. Do you remember Arrow?
Yep.
I would go to Arrow with my grandpa.
Arrow's a restaurant in the town of Kansai.
Yeah, an old diner.
It's not there anymore, but...
And I would go with my grandpa and cousins, and yeah, I just wouldn't eat the burger. I just didn't like it. So yeah, it was just something that was that's just who I was as a person. And then the older I got, I ate it a bit, but then leaving high school, moving here and playing in that band, you learn that, you don't actually have to do this. Like, you don't have to eat meat. And I never really liked it in the first place, so it just made a lot of sense.
That's awesome. I'm really in support of that. So, okay, well, Derek, I think that's what you do, right? Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about what you do?
I like to talk to just anybody. Yesterday I went to the Y. I hadn't been there since COVID.
Right. It's open.
Yeah, and literally within the first 5 minutes I already had 4 decent conversations with
people.
Nice.
That's good. You know, I find that when I have conversations as well, it brings my mood up, makes me happier.
Yeah, no, and that's pretty much why I do it. Plus, it's just, you learn stuff too from people. I think we get stuck in our own perspective sometimes.
That stuff, I know all about that for sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. That's great. Well, let's move on to question 2. What don't you do, Derek? And I know we talked about one thing you don't do, and that's eating meat.
Yeah. I don't eat meat. I don't. One thing I don't do is not think about why people eat meat and don't eat meat.
You don't think about you don't concern yourself with why people make the choices they do to eat.
No, I thought I had worded that differently. I don't fail to consider that. Meaning I do, which means I tend to draw parallels with pets. People like pets, right? And essentially, okay, well, if you have a pet, we have all these animal rights protections. Well, surely an animal that's not a pet should fall under those same laws and protections, but they don't. And so that's one thing that I don't do is... Sorry, I'm confusing myself.
Okay, so simply, what don't you do?
Okay, what don't I do? Well, besides not eating meat, I don't drive anymore. Drive my own vehicle, because it's a ridiculous endeavor living in an area where the roads and snow is as bad as it is.
I don't know what you mean. I have the same kind of car you do, and we don't get far when there's lots of snow on the ground, right?
Yeah. I don't binge drink. I don't binge really on anything, which I think I didn't really realize, but that's actually important because a lot of people I find, they're proud to I binge this, I binge that, but I don't know.
Netflix or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that, you get really at a balance and then you have to somehow, to balance it out, you have to binge in some other way.
Would you call that TV karma?
TV karma? I don't even know if TV has karma.
Well, it's a difficult one there.
Unless that's a new concept.
We'd have to talk about that another time.
But to be honest, there's not many things I don't do. You know what I mean? I do a little bit of everything. The only thing, yeah, like, and I'll admit it, like, you know, sometimes I'll be, say, judgmental or, you know, be frustrated. So, yeah, there's not many things that I don't do. I guess, yeah, just eating meat and binging.
Okay, so, all right, we have to go to the third question, and it's going to be, we pretty much answered this already, but why don't you do it? Why don't you eat meat, and why don't you binge? Like, what's the real reason? Like, I understand that there's an issue behind binge there, so I'd like you to kind of explain that a little bit better.
Well, actually, and I don't think I got to, really the second reason about not eating meat was because, I don't know, I'm empathetic to animals, like, they're sentient. Just because you don't communicate with them doesn't mean they're complex, you know, beings that, you know, feel, you know, pain, because they do. And so
Absolutely.
why would I
Yeah.
you know, why would I want to partake in that? And what was the other part you asked me? And why?
Yeah, sure, wrote it down, but why don't you binge?
Yeah, so the older you get, you kind of realize that, okay, you look at your peers, and then you look at how your peers were and yourself were at a certain age. You fast forward a couple of decades, and you get to know old people. And when you talk to old people, they kind of tell you what life was like. And you start putting this kind of like index together, or spectrum of life. And it's like you can see the people, the choices that they made at certain stages of their life, in terms of, like, say, binge drinking or doing certain activities. And you start to see long-term, is that going to be a positive or a negative for my life? And you start seeing that, okay, well, binging on this, or the reasons why I don't do this, is because, well, if I do those things in the long term, it's probably not going to be good for me. Even though in the short term it might be very fun, you kind of weigh those consequences, right?
Absolutely.
And so I think with school, I never really wanted to go to school, but I thought I was at a point in my life where I'm like, well, what else am I doing? In the long term, it would be a good thing. And so I think I apply that logic to why I don't do certain things, because the reason I'm not doing them is because in the long run, it's probably not going to help me. Or you'll get out of balance by doing too much of one thing, not enough of the other.
That's very good. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah,
fantastic. Those are the three questions we asked everybody. Derek is the first person, and he did a wonderful job. So thank you, Derek, for that. I guess we'll move on to the next segment here, and it's you ask me three questions, and I'll be as honest as I can to answer them.
Okay. First question would be, what is your earliest visual memory?
Might be around this time. I have two memories. We went to Panorama when I was maybe 3 or 4 years old. Probably 3. It was before kindergarten, and I went to kindergarten when I was 4. So I went to kindergarten, I was in a hot tub, and I was slicking frost off of one of the handlebars, the handles to get into the hot tub.
Okay.
And my mom said, don't do that, and I remember Panorama very much. And I have a lot of really good memories from that, because they put me in a race, and I was 3 or 4 years old, and I never really understood why, and I wish I had won that race, because my life would have been completely different.
Yeah, it would have been a game changer.
Huge game changer, but I lost the race. So anyway, I have a memory of that from there, and I have a memory of being on a chairlift and crying because it was so high up. Yeah. So I'd say around that time, I lost my robot shirt.
Okay.
I had a big robot on my shirt, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
And it disappeared in Panorama, and I came home and I was crying. And those are those 4 memories that I can. They're basically from the same time, and that was probably the first I can remember.
So, and do you like? How do you feel about those memories?
Good. Well, with the exception of losing the robot shirt and me crying and being so upset, I think being in Panorama and. Those memories are really fantastic. Absolutely.
I find like memories, because sometimes we'll have good and bad memories, but sometimes if you look at the bad memory and you kind of like really unpack that, like why that was bad or what happened, and then it quickly doesn't seem as bad as it actually was at the time, or you can understand it better, process it better. So sometimes I'll remember things that were bad at certain points, but when you really analyze it, like, okay, and I think that if we had better memory processing, we wouldn't have a lot of that trauma, right, that we carry with us.
Yeah.
Because it happens to all of us, but looking back, it's like, no, that's just life circumstances sometimes. So say the robot shirt, it just, it happens.
Indeed.
But
that was an unfortunate situation of the robot shirt, but a fantastic view to memory at the hot tub and the skiing and all that.
So question number 2, it's related. What is your first thought that you can remember? Like, where you're actually thinking about something.
Wow. That's interesting. Well, like, I want to say, I remember thinking while underwater.
Okay.
I was kneeboarding behind our boat, and I must have been 4 or 5.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a strap over my legs.
Mm-hmm.
And the boat stopped, so did I, and I flipped over. And I was stuck to the board underneath the water, and I remember sitting underneath thinking, am I going to get out of this?
Oh, wow.
And I slid out and I was okay. It took about 30 seconds of being underwater, and my family in the boat and everything. And I was underwater. I remember looking around underwater, seeing the sun shining through the water and stuff. And so that would be one of them for sure that I can remember.
That's interesting. So like you're processing.
I would have no choice but to process and to remember that.
Yeah.
It was a near-death experience almost. So so I'd say that would be it.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I'm wondering if we're more prone to remember things that were somewhat, where your senses were heightened because there was danger, right? And so your brain has to really engage.
Absolutely. Like, I remember everything about what happened and being there at that time. And I was really young, and that was a long time ago, so it must have been significant.
So question number 3, we're going to go to the other end of the paradigm. What do you see things being like in terms, just society-wise, in 100 years from now?
Well, that's a really good question, because I'll be honest with you, I've been really delusional up until recent. And my delusions and illusions, or just understandings of things, have brought me to a place where I believe things that other people don't. I don't tell anybody, and except, I tell my doctor I live in delusion, and it's a little bit different than I told him that since that time, which was like 2 months ago. But like, what I was seeing in like 100 years, I was thinking 250 years, but we'll go to 100 years, and like, peace and unity on Earth, to tell you the truth, in society, starting in places like Canada and growing, like spreading throughout the good nations on Earth, like into the bad ones and throughout. So I say 250 years from now we're laughing, but 100 years from now we still got work to do.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I think you're right. You're probably more realistic in saying 250 because, again, like if you look historically, 100 years ago, I think they thought we'd have spaceships by now. But showing that we have ideas, but in order to realize them, it's a snail's pace. Right?
Well, we're kind of moving exponentially, I think, compared to how things were, right? Like our technology and our advancements and our understandings. Like, we have this expansive information at our fingertips now, like that we never had before, and we can figure out pretty much anything we need to. I think we have some smart people on Earth, and like, in fact, they're doing things that are progressively moving us ahead.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think though it's one of those. It's that analogy, like 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yeah, I just gotta go back a little bit.
I guess you have to reevaluate.
Well, if you make a mistake, you gotta go back and fix it, don't you?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I had somebody tell me, and I asked them, you know, it was something to do with like politics, and I'm like, you know, like in your opinion, I asked him like, you know, is this just repeating history? And he's like, well, you know, history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does look the same. And I thought that was really interesting because it's like, yeah, he's right. Like you can't really predict that something's going to happen just based on history.
Mm-hmm.
But man, it's fairly similar. It might be a little different, but so. Yeah.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens. We really haven't been around very long compared to how much time has gone by in the universe. You know, like in Earth, and like now Earth people, like human beings, like we really haven't been around long enough to make the curve look like it's supposed to look. I think, you know, and it'll probably take 100,000 years before we figure it out. You know, like to the point where we get beyond, you know, our normal conceptions.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think we're still, and it's funny, I think we're in this position where, say you're like climbing a mountain, and then you have a really good flat area where the incline is bad and you could climb it really quickly. And I think we're at that now because if you look how fast, in 100 years, like technology has completely transformed everything about the world, and it's only going to get faster as that technology, because think like 100 years ago we were riding horses around.
What's that exponential growth, right?
Yeah.
Like it is there, it is growing. I just, when I am in a position of understanding things differently, like I come to a realization that in the end, like at the end of time maybe, or in end of our earth or whatever, life on earth, like there has to become a point when we get to a singularity of understanding and connection, and like that's something for deep in the future. But if we're to go far enough, that's as far as we should get to for sure, you know.
What I think we do, like I think we do have a singularity of certain commonalities among people, like.
Mm-hmm. But you know, we're not united, we're not one, we're not people that are, you know, accustomed to being with each other, you know, really.
Well, right, but those principles of like life and security, like those, you can go in any culture and there's a lot of similarities. They might not look, yeah, like it's the same, but it looks different. Like I've taken some anthropology, and the thing is that there's those communication or cultural barriers. But I think you're right. I think as time goes on, we're going to be able to understand people. There'll be a lot more commonalities that are reciprocated. But now there's so much. The barriers are usually in terms of language, communication, and culture. And we've been taught that culture is bad, mainly because they're different than ours. There's no other fundamental reason that they're bad. It's just because they're different, or we don't like the way they do things. But that's kind of irrelevant. The commonality is, well, it's life, right? We all want to live without fear and, you know, oppression. And I think every culture operates that way. It's just that a lot of these cultures are people in particular, and our culture is really bad for it too. There's opportunity for exploitation. So you have to eliminate that. By that, you either have to bring people that are exploitable, you have to bring them up to where they don't allow exploitation, or we have to teach that exploitation is no longer something that is socially valued or acceptable.
Well, Derek, that's very interesting, and I think we've done pretty good for our first episode of My Time, so thanks for coming by.
Yeah.
And thanks to Brain for operating the camera, and
thank you, Brain.
This has been My Time. I'm Danny Rozowski.
I'm Derek, it's my time.
Until your time, goodbye.